All right, so we are back with Conservation Stories Canada. My name is Jesse, and over 2021, I'll be heading out to every province and up to the territories to feature stories of conservation in action. In the meantime, I've had the great pleasure and thrill of partnering with some of Canada's conservation all-stars and some of its up-and-coming conservation leaders. And today, I am joined by Julian Victor. His work is amazing. He is a producer and filmmaker who's made a whole bevy of amazing short documentaries on some urban wildlife here in Toronto and around. So, Julian, thanks so much for sitting down with me today, man.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you. I'm thrilled and finally honored to be here because it's been a long time coming, Jesse. It has been.
You know what? It's the best possible problem when you're so busy actually doing the work that you can't talk about the work. So it's been a pleasure to see the stuff you've created, and I'm really jazzed to talk about it today. So, to start, why urban wildlife? Like, why cover things in Toronto? Is it because it's close to home, it's nice, or is there a story here you're looking to tell?
Well, I think part of the reason with urban wildlife is I've always been interested in, like, going back years ago. It's like I've always been interested in urban with wildlife and capturing the essence of the city. And like when I was just first breaking into like the wildlife film industry, I'm like, let me just look around the city and see what's here. And then as I started going through trial and error, I started seeing like, yo, there's a lot of wildlife here. And then going to the different region, the different areas of the city, and seeing the different wildlife was great. And over the years I got to capture some of that. But in the last year in particular, where we've been stuck in a pandemic and we can't really go to like any of these exotic places anymore, I just was like, all right, let's go around the city and see what's there. And it turns out that there's such a great biodiversity that can almost rival that of other, like some of the more nature-esque areas that we see in like a BBC or National Geographic doc. And it's great to see the whole life and death struggle and the drama that plays out, and it plays out in our city, and sometimes we have no idea about it, and then we actually see it. And it's great to witness, especially in the last year. It was great to kind of see like the diversity of wildlife found, and it drew me because now I'm like, I don't need to go to those places. Right. I could just go outside to my backyard and I could actually see like foxes raising their kids, or I could see like cormorants raising their young, or I could just see like deer trying to find a mate in a cemetery. It's actually really cool to actually see that and how they coexist with us as they coexist with human beings. It was in the last year, it's been really great to see.
So yesterday I went walking down the Humber River near my house, and I saw a hawk having a conversation with some ducks. There were two ducks in the water, and the hawk was also in the water, which was super weird. They were apart, like having clearly it was
I wonder what that discussion was like. It's just like,
I have no idea.
Squawk. It's like, it's like,
what's going on there. But like,
the ducks were probably like, you want to try to go with us? It's like, I think I could have a go with you guys. Like, you really want to try it? So, you know what I mean?
If you'd been there to film it, maybe you would have figured out what happened. I scared the hawk off, so it was kind of too bad. But I'm curious, you mentioned like deer in a cemetery, foxes in your backyard. Like, what are some of the most unusual things that you've seen that people who have been in Toronto their whole lives, who've been in a major city, might not expect to actually run into? Coolest stuff. No pressure.
Oh, no pressure. I would say, you know what? Like, one of the coolest things I think to me was the deer in the cemetery. Yeah. Like, for the longest time, I wanted to see white-tailed deer here in Toronto, and you see them in the Don Valley, you see them along the Humber, but like, it's always been a challenge for me to find. And then to come across and find out that the best place in the city to see deer is in a cemetery is truly awesome. And the coolest thing about seeing them there is the fact that it's their ability. They're like, I call them like phantom hooves, or they can kind of appear and disappear among the tombstones. And it's just so, when you're in there and you see it, you're just like, whoa, they can literally, you're looking for them and then, oh, they're right in front of you. And then they suddenly just disappear. And then you're like, wait, where'd they go? And it's so cool to see and how adaptable they are to our presence, because people go there and pay their respects to the family that they lost or what have you. And the deer are just there and they browse and they don't they don't pay no mind, and it's kind of like this mutual respect. Like the coolest thing I saw was I was filming this buck while he was looking for the does to mate with during the rutting season, and I saw him like thrashing his antlers at a bush, and then in the background you have this woman this nun walking right by wearing a mask, and then he just kind of stopped and he's like, oh, okay, and then he went right back to, but there was so close proximity, it was cool to see.
Yeah.
And you're just like, and it's just that coexistence. It was like that coexistence. She was there, she didn't even pay no mind. He was there, didn't pay no mind. And I thought that was like really cool to see how they kind of interact, like how they interact with each other. I thought that was really neat. I think that's one of the coolest things I've seen in the
Oh,
city. The other one I think is to the I would say like one of the coolest things for me I saw is like how like a fox family I filmed along the highway here in Toronto, the Gardner, and how they raise their kids, and how there's like they're close proximity to people, but they adapted. And I like seeing that. I like seeing that, how like sometimes we feel like, there are these green spaces and we can only see them there. It's like, no, they have found a way to adapt and live among us. And I think um shows like the BBC and sometimes Nat Geo doesn't really show that much, where it shows, so it's like,
yeah.
it's like, okay, they're in their space, we're in ours, but we're interconnected, and it's great to see how they just kind of, after a while, if you don't bother them, they don't bother you, and they just go about their way. We're all at the end of the day just trying to mind our own business and trying to survive. So it's been really, what I've been seeing has been really cool.
I love that. I mean, by the way, Planet Earth, you're right. When I was a kid, I never saw animals in cities. Planet Earth 2 had the Amazing Cities episode, which if people haven't seen that, it's one of the best hours of natural history.
The leopards in Mumbai. That is crazy. That's the like, I feel bad for those dogs, but leopards got to eat. So
we'll link that into the end of the broadcast for people to check out. By the way, Phantom Hooves disappearing amongst the tombstones is like a manga I would absolutely read. That sounds awesome. We should turn this into something. There's some cool artists out there, I'm sure, who can make that happen.
You're onto something, Jesse. I was like, yeah.
We'll loop some people in. I'll make it happen. Julian, so you had this experience. You get to showcase these stories of people coexisting with wildlife, and I mean, what a special experience in the cemetery. But in cities in general, one of the big things is that people don't get that connection to nature quite often, or they don't think that they can get that connection to nature, and so you have people that are, it's harder to showcase to people the need for conservation and other things when they don't actually have that direct one-on-one connection or personal link to nature. So what's been some of the feedback to your work as you're showing these things like amazing wildlife in the city? What have some of the people that you've shared this with said to you about what they've learned based on what you've created?
It's been a more surprise, because I think sometimes people are surprised by the amount of wildlife that is here in Toronto. Like, it's like, and when we think of Toronto in terms of wildlife, there are two species that comes to mind: our resident trash pandas, our raccoons, and pigeons. And I think we kind of, because they're so prolific, we see them all the time. But what people don't see is like, I've had to tell people, like, there's like over 2,000 coyotes that live in the GTA, but you almost never see them. You have like although red-tailed hawks have been a lot more seen, a lot more, but they're prolific because the amount of pigeons that are in the area, so they acquire a lot of food. So it's like you have peregrine falcons that nest. It's peregrine falcons that nest here during the spring months, and then you have like cormorants, double-breasted cormorants that migrate along the Leslie Spit, and there's like thousands of them, and you see them flying among the nest, and you have the backdrop of the city skyline, the CN Tower. It's the perfect way, but people don't kind of realize that, because sometimes people just, if you just look up and notice it, like when you look up and I've seen a hawk nail a pigeon right in my neighborhood, and it's like plucking the feathers above a grocery store, and I just see the feathers falling down to the floor, and I'm like, is anybody else seeing this? This is amazing. And people, and but I think it's just like kind of making people realize that there is a lot of wildlife here, and people are generally surprised when I tell them that. Like, when you go and you see turkey vultures soaring above a busy intersection, people are like, what's that big bird? It's like, that's a turkey vulture. Like, there are turkey vultures here? It's like, yeah, turkey vultures are here. It's like, it's cool to see their I think the reaction of the surprise is great. And I think then they're kind of like, oh, I want to like know more and see what else is here. And I think that's cool. Catching people off guard is nice to see.
It really is. I mean, the stories you highlighted are fantastic. I saw a crow eating a mouse the other day, flying with it in Rouge Park. I had 2 coyotes run right at me in the Humber River recently. My fiance, went to run away, and I was like, well, they'll peel off at some point, and they did. And thankfully, but my relationship's intact after that.
Okay.
I mean, there's so much to see. I'm really glad that you've had this reaction, that other people are surprised, they're excited, they want to know more. And you get to highlight things like turkey vultures, which is a fantastic bird, by the way, that has amazing.
It's weird. It's funny because a lot of the animals that I've like filmed have become like my favorite animals. Like, so like even with birds. So I like my favorite bird is like the African fish eagle, and I just love their distinctive call. And I saw them when I was in Africa, and their calls are great. But here, like the 2 favorite bird species that I like is double-crested cormorants, which are horribly misrepresented and been misunderstood, and turkey vultures. I actually was walking down the street and I saw 2 of them soaring above, and I stopped and I was like, oh, vultures, amazing. So I've grown to love like a lot of the animals, a lot of the animals that I've filmed, and it's just like I have a special place in my heart for double-crested cormorants too. It's great.
We have the largest colony in the world in Toronto.
We do, the largest colony in Eastern North America. Yeah, like 50,000 of them by the end of the spring, by the end of the fall, before they take off. There's like 50,000 of them, and it's great to see them just flying and then you see the skyline of Toronto in the background. It's the perfect symbol of urban wildlife that you could possibly have.
I hope more people get the chance to see this. If you're in the general Toronto area, head out there. It's amazing to head out to those parks, head out to the islands to see these birds in person. They're really, really, I find them really beautiful. And it's nice to know, Julian, that there's another person out there who's just staring at the sky randomly when they walk around the block. It's not just
right.
You've had the pleasure of being in the background of a lot of news broadcasts over the last few years. And so in your time doing this, have you seen a shift in how people perceive conservation and wildlife? I mean, you get to be behind the scenes for all these stories coming about, whether you're telling them personally or seeing them showcased in the news. Are people more responsive to conservation? Are they learning more about it? I mean, we've seen this with climate, where more people know about climate change. They're more inclined to take action. Has this shift happened with biodiversity yet, or are we not quite there yet?
We are, I think, especially when you're in broadcast, I think when you bring it to the attention and people are more so like, oh, we have wildlife in this area. You bring it to attention, but like some people, some people, it's like with climate change, it was a gradual thing. Like with wildlife, it's like, I think you just have to kind of bring that enthusiasm and actually show that there's a lot here. And yeah, I do think some people are learning more about conservation and more about wildlife through broadcasting, and then you just have to keep showing them. Like, I think nowadays where there's this like yearning for finding more about nature and being out there to get tranquility, and us kind of being a little more in tune with that. So now people are noticing that more. And then especially sometimes, like I said earlier, like we don't we kind of like we don't have this time we can't travel to, like, we've been told, like, if you want to see nature, you go to like the Amazon or go to the Serengeti or the Kruger National Park or wherever. But now it's like you could kind of just go to your backyard and you'll be kind of amazed to see what you could find. And I think people are really starting, especially with the pandemic, people are really starting to notice that, yeah, you could go out and you could take in nature, and you see like see the different types of wildlife, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And then you kind of like you will kind of want to learn more and find out what's there and what animals are there and what you want to see, especially with kids. So kids, like, they're like, oh, what's that? Like my little cousin Jacob, he's like, oh my God, what's that? I want to, like, learn more about that. And he's like fascinated. So you kind of want to nurture that now. So I think it's gradually going the way that climate change is going. It's like you gradually have to kind of like just let people, like, especially people are now, people are now looking for like an escape, and nature is a great way. And what better way to show that is in within something within your city where you can actually experience that for yourself versus having to go across the world to go see it.
Yeah, you save a lot on flights, and you can just literally like walk down the street and go to the
Pretty
local.
much, it's true.
So, I mean, as sort of one last question, this message of more people are getting involved in nature, they're getting engaged with nature, especially locally. One of the big things that you've spoken on over the last few years is discrimination in nature, and there's been a lot of these campaigns: Black Mammologist Week, Black Birders Week. There's been Black AF in STEM. You've been either involved or showcasing these movements, and the shift over the last year and a bit. Do you see the culture shifting? And I mean, it seems to me that it's shifting in a very positive direction, but I'm curious your take on it. And I'm curious, what are the steps that we need to do to really make a bigger positive difference in the years to come? Because you're a great advocate for this. And I'm just curious.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've noticed in the last year it has shifted. It's still given like a lot more. I think in the situation with Christian Cooper in
Yeah.
Central, that kind of opened the door for the wind. Like him being like a birder, people are like, "What do you mean you're a birder? You're black." Like black people, and it's like, but no, you're actually like it actually opened this whole window of like showing that no, like we like nature, we like we're here in nature, and there's a lot of great people like you've had Peter Shorey on, and like it's kind of it kind of brought to attention that hey, there's a lot of black people interested in nature and the outdoors, and now I think brands and people are latching onto that like for the longest time, because if you want to save the planet, you have to have everybody on board. But how
Yep.
do you have everybody on board if you're only if the representation is only a certain type of person, and then other people don't feel like it's for them? So now you're seeing more people that a more greater diversity, and now people are being like, oh, I I see someone like that, and it's not just for a certain. Let's keep it real, like it's not just for white people. And then you like, and now you want to like bring it to attention, and where people feel like, oh, okay, if someone that representation is important, is someone that looks like myself is like, oh, what he's doing, so that it is possible
Yeah.
to do to be more involved in nature, and it's not just like seen as like a white person thing, and you could actually like get involved and be a part of different initiatives to help conservation, whether it's in your city or abroad. And it kind like yeah, the last year kind of opened that up
Yeah.
for people. It kind of opened that up for people, from like just nature enthusiasts to companies to really see like we've been out here, but now we're finally getting the getting the recognition to
Yeah.
kind of make it to kind of be out there more and show that we love nature just as much as everybody else.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message. And certainly for me, seeing Parks Canada, U.S. National Park System, they're really trying to become more inclusive for everybody. There's so many organizations now, and I will link these at the end of the broadcast so people can check that out. But I want to say personally, it's nice to see people like you leading the charge on this. And I think that a lot of good action has been done in the last year. There's a lot more to do. But from my own background in public broadcasting, I can tell you that when we have Black scientists and naturalists on, the response of Black kids are more inclined to ask questions of Black
Yep.
naturalists on our programs, because it is someone who looks like them, and maybe they haven't had that experience before. They haven't seen someone like that on the BBC or National Geographic. And while
Yep.
that's changing slowly but surely, those sort of direct interactions and having people like you.
It's changed. It's like with that you and the BBC is changing.
It is.
It's
Totally.
slowly. It's been a discussion for a while. It's been a discuss like there's been a discussion for a while, because it's like I said, it's like you want to how you like again with you, how are you talking about biodiversity,
Yeah.
but the people who are leading the charge aren't diverse. So it's kind of like so I think what's happening now, it's kind of it's changing a bit, and you're seeing seeing great people like coming to the forefront and like change. So out of this, it's really great to see, and there's great endless possibilities for that to happen, and see and yeah, for kids to kind of young kids of color and black, it's to actually see like, hey, I could actually go into this into this as a profession, and that is great. That is really great to see.
That is a really special thing. And I mean, I think on that positive note, we're at the 20-minute mark. Julian, I really appreciate you sitting down with me today. And I think there's some really cool stuff here. And I'm excited to see your own work personally in the years to come. And I really appreciate this.
Yeah, I need to post more. I have like my hard drive full of wildlife stuff, and I'm like, what to put like the what to like show? It's like, but it's I'm on that right now.
We will link in some of your cool new stuff into this interview when we're done. And I just, again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
No, thank you, Jesse. It's been great, and what you're doing is awesome and bringing attention to this. So thank you. I'm honored to be on here, and thank you so much.